At the baby shower, my daughter-in-law lifted my quilt by 2 corners, the way you'd hold something that might be contagious, and dropped it in the trash. I didn't argue. She was smiling at a phone camera. "We have a theme for the nursery," she said. The room did that tight little laugh. My son first stood against the wall with a drink he wasn't drinking. His mouth opened, then closed. He said nothing. The quilt was Ohio Star, 9 blocks, each one cut from fabric I'd saved across 40 years of marriage, Walter's work shirts, my old maternity dress, the blanket from the hospital room the night he died, 3 months of piecing with hands that don't close right anymore, and it landed at the bottom of a steel can lined with a white bag. I brushed off a scrap of tissue paper, folded it neat, and walked out without a word. What none of them knew, what I didn't even know yet, was sewn into the seam. That night, my son called. His voice was already shaking before he spoke. "Mom, please, what was sewn inside the lining?" If you've ever had something you made with your own hands treated like garbage, stay with me to the end. What was hidden in that quilt changed everything that came after. Subscribe now so you don't miss how this ends. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had someone throw away something you made without knowing what it was really worth? The drive home was 11 minutes through Cuyahoga Falls. The quilt sat on the passenger seat where Walter used to sit. I didn't look at it until I was inside with the door locked. 9 blocks on the kitchen table under the overhead light Walter installed in 1997, Ohio Star, each one cut from something that still had our life in it. Top left, pale blue broadcloth from his work shirt, 19 years at the plant. Next to it, floral cotton from my maternity dress, 1989. The center block, the one that gave me the most trouble, cut from the thin hospital blanket the night he died. A small stain I couldn't get out. Coffee or betadine, I was never sure. I'd placed it in the middle on purpose. My stitching had gone uneven in the last 6 weeks. The arthritis moved from my knuckles into my wrists. Some mornings I couldn't hold the needle at all. 3 months of work, and Amanda dropped it into a steel can because it didn't match the nursery theme. The quilt smelled faintly of floral garbage bag and something sweet, the shower cake I hadn't eaten. I ran my thumb along the bottom seam and stopped. The stitching didn't match mine. Mine was small and even. This was slightly larger, slightly less careful. A man's stitches. Walter mended his own clothes when I wasn't home. He wasn't good at it, but he was stubborn about it. I touched the seam again, something firm inside. Paper, folded, maybe 1/8 of an inch thick. Walter had been dead 14 months. He'd cut these squares himself before the diagnosis got bad, laid them out on the dining table, labeled each one with my shirt, 1978, hospital, last night. I'd found them after the funeral in a shoebox with a note. "Finish it, Helen, however you want." He'd never mentioned sewing anything into the lining. The seam ripper from the drawer, red handle worn smooth on one side, 36 years at the shop. I worked the stitch slowly. Walter's thread was a slightly different shade of cream. Close enough I'd never noticed in the evenings. Under the bright light, 12 inches from the fabric, I could see it. He'd sewn a pocket into the bottom seam before I'd started quilting. He'd known I'd cover it. Known I wouldn't find it unless something made me look. The last stitch gave. I reached in and pulled out a folded document and a sealed envelope. The document was yellowed at the edges. Standard life insurance policy. I recognized the format. Walter and I had sat at this same table until in 1995 and reviewed our coverage after Greg was born. But this one was different. Standalone policy, paid up whole life, issued 1996, face value $35,200. I turned to the beneficiary line, firstborn grandchild, not Greg, not me. A person who did not exist in 1996. Greg was 9. Walter had bought a life insurance policy for a baby he wouldn't meet for 28 years and never told me. The white envelope was sealed with tape gone brown and brittle. his handwriting on the front. For Helen, after, I didn't open it. If you've ever found something under the surface of your own life, subscribe. There's more. I didn't open the envelope that night. I put it back in the pocket and re-sewed the seam with the same cream thread, smaller stitches than Walter's, the way I'd always covered for him when he mended something he shouldn't have. The policy I left on the table. I made tea I didn't drink. I sat in Walter's chair by the window and watched the rain and thought about a man who bought life insurance for a grandchild who didn't exist yet. The furnace clicked on. The kitchen light buzzed. The policy sat on the table like something that had been waiting. I went to bed at 10, which was early for me, and lay in the dark and listened to the house settle. Walter's side of the closet was still full. I hadn't moved it. Greg had offered twice. I'd said not yet both times, and he hadn't pushed because pushing wasn't what Greg did. Greg smoothed. Greg avoided. Greg stood against walls at baby showers while his wife dropped 40 years of fabric into the garbage. I slept badly. Woke at 4 with my hands aching. Ran them under hot water in the dark bathroom, feeling for the faucet by memory. Stood there a long time. In the morning, the policy was still on the table. The rain had stopped. The sky was white, the kind of white that in Ohio means it could go either way, snow or sun or just more of the same nothing. I called the number on the policy, a recorded voice, menu options. I pressed 0 and waited. A woman named Donna picked up a porth ring, State Farm, Cuyahoga Falls office. She could see me at 2 if I brought the policy and the death certificate. The office sat in a strip mall between a laundromat and a nail salon. 3 cars in the lot. Donna was younger than her voice, reading glasses pushed up on her head, a mug that said, "World's Okayest Agent." She read the policy with her lips moving slightly. "This is unusual," she said, "not suspicious, just factual. A paid-up whole life with a grandchild as beneficiary, purchased before the grandchild existed." "My husband bought it," I said. "1996, he didn't discuss it with me." She typed. The heater came on behind us with a thunk. "Policies valid, premium paid in full at issue. Since your husband's passed, this is a claim." She looked up. "Death certificate." I handed it to her. The machine whirred and spat out a warm copy. "Since the beneficiary's a minor, payment goes to a custodial account. I'll need the child's full legal name as it appears on the birth certificate." "Carter Gregory Marsh," I said, and wrote it down with one of their pens, chewed on the cap, the kind that skips if you press too hard. Donna typed it in. "Date of birth?" I gave her the date. November 14th, 3 weeks after the shower. He'd been born 9 days ago. Greg had called to tell me, his voice careful, like he was testing whether I'd answer. I'd said congratulations and asked how much. He weighed and hung up before he could ask me to come to the hospital. "Last name Marsh," Donna said, reading from her screen. "Father Gregory Walter Marsh, Mother Amanda Lynn Marsh, maiden name Price." I nodded. "Carter," she said. "That's not a family name." No. Donna didn't look up from her screen. She was just making conversation the way you do when you're filling out forms. But the word sat on the desk between us like something with weight. Greg had told me the name when they picked it. Over the phone, 2 months before the shower. Amanda tested a few. Carter scored high with our group. I'd asked if there were any family names they'd considered. A pause. Then, "We're going with Carter." Walter had died 4 months before that call. And before he died, he'd told me once, in the hospital, his voice thin, that if he ever had a grandson, he wanted the boy named after his father. Franklin Wallace Marsh. Raised 3 children alone in a 2-bedroom house in Barberton after their mother left in 1961. Worked at the Goodyear plant for 31 years, never remarried, never complained. Walter had said it matter-of-factly, the way he said everything, like he was just telling me the weather. "I want that name to go forward," he'd said. Then he'd asked for Jell-O and the subject was done. Greg had been in the room when Walter said it. sitting in the chair by the window, the same chair I now sit in every evening. He'd heard it. And when Amanda tested names and Carter scored high, Greg had chosen easy. Donna handed me a receipt. You should receive the benefit payment within 10 to 14 business days. It'll be made payable to the custodian of the account for Carter Gregory Marsh, minor. I put the receipt in my purse beside the death certificate I'd already gotten back. The fake ficus watched me leave. I opened Walter's letter at the kitchen table that night. The tape cracked and flaked when I peeled it. Inside was a single sheet of yellow legal paper, his handwriting in pencil. He always preferred pencil, said ink was for final drafts. Helen, if you're reading this, the quilt is finished, and something made you look at the bottom seam. I'm sorry for the surprise. I should have told you about the policy, but you would have argued. You would have said it was morbid to insure a child who didn't exist yet, and you would have been right, and I would have done it anyway. The policy is for the baby, not for Greg, not for you. For the baby, because my father did something similar for me when I was young, not insurance, but a small savings account he started the year I was born, in 1954, with $17. He added to it when he could. It wasn't much by the time I was 18, but it was the principle of the thing. Someone was thinking of me before I could think of myself. My father's name was Franklin Wallace Marsh. He raised me and my two sisters after our mother left. He never talked about it much. He just did it. I wanted his name to continue, I told Greg. I don't know if he'll use it. You know how Greg is. The money is for the child's future. Use your judgment on how to hand it over. You've always had better judgment than me about people. I read it twice. Then I folded it back the way it had been folded and set it on the table next to the policy receipt. I told Greg, I don't know if he'll use it. He'd been in the room. I remembered it clearly now. The way Greg had looked up from his phone, the way he'd said, "That's nice, Dad," and gone back to scrolling. Walter had turned his face to the window. He hadn't pushed it. The Marshmen didn't push things. They mentioned them once and then let silence do the work, and if silence didn't do the work, they let it go. Greg had let it go, the way he let the quilt go into the can, the way he let Amanda decide the name, the way he let everything happen to him and called it keeping the peace. I didn't call Greg that night. I put the letter in the shoebox on the top shelf of Walter's closet, next to the remaining fabric squares. There were 3 left over, small pieces I hadn't needed, each one still labeled in Walter's masking tape handwriting. Dress, 1985. Curtain, 2003. Tablecloth, 2019. Underneath the squares was something I hadn't noticed before, a folded newspaper clipping, brittle at the creases. Akron Beacon Journal, 1979. A short item, 3 paragraphs, about a Goodyear retirement dinner. Franklin W. Marsh, 31 years, tire building department. A grainy photo of a man in a plain suit, not smiling exactly, just standing the way men of that generation stood for cameras, like they were waiting for it to be over. Walter had circled the name in pencil, the same pencil he used for everything that mattered to him. He'd never shown it to me. I sat on the closet floor for a while with it in my lap. I closed the closet door. Walter's shirts were still hanging on the left side. I could smell him if I stood close enough. Not strongly, just the ghost of it, fabric softener, and the particular scent of his skin that I never had a name for. I stood there for a minute. Then I closed the door and went back to the kitchen and washed the 2 dishes in the sink and wiped the counter and turned off the light. The next morning, I went to the post office and mailed a card to Amanda and Greg. A generic congratulations card with a drawing a baby booty on the front. I signed it Love Helen and put a $20 bill inside. I did not mention the quilt. I did not mention the policy. I addressed it to both of them, which took me longer than it should have. 4 days later, the check came, $35,200, made payable to custodian for Carter Gregory Marsh, minor. It was a large check, larger than any check I'd ever held. It felt like paper. It felt like nothing. It sat in my purse for 2 days while I thought about what Walter had written. Use your judgment on how to hand it over. I drove past the house where Greg and Amanda lived, didn't stop, just slowed down. There was a car in the driveway I didn't recognize, probably Amanda's mother. A stroller on the porch, still in its box. The nursery window had a new shade, gray I think, or maybe pale green. Whatever color matched the theme. I kept driving. Went to the library, sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. The library had a sign out front advertising a book sale. Saturday 9 to 3, all paperbacks $1. I thought about going in. I didn't. At home that night, I took the check out of my purse and laid it on the table next to where the policy had been. I made tea. This time I drank it. I called Greg on Thursday. He answered on the third ring. Mom, how's the baby? He's good. He's really good, Mom. You should come see him. I will. We both knew I wouldn't. Not yet. Greg, I need to tell you something. Your father had a life insurance policy. I found it sewn into the quilt. A pause. The kind where I could hear him processing, rearranging what he thought he knew. Insurance policy, he said, $35,200. Paid up, issued 1996. Another pause, longer. Mom, the money. It's not about the money, I said it quietly. The way I'd learned to say things at the shop when a woman brought in a wedding dress she'd already let someone else ruin, and I had to tell her it couldn't be saved. You don't raise your voice, you don't soften it, you just say it. It's about the name, Greg. Silence. Franklin Wallace, your grandfather, your father told you, in the hospital. I was there. You were there. He didn't answer. He wanted that name to go forward. You heard him say it. And when Amanda tested names and Carter scored high, you didn't say a word. Mom, it's just a name. Your father didn't think it was just a name. The silence on the line changed, got heavier, like something had shifted in the room where he was standing. Greg, I know. 2 words, barely audible. I'll handle the policy, I said. The way your father asked me to. He didn't ask how, he didn't argue, he said, okay. And then after a moment, I'm sorry, I didn't say anything to that. I said, give Carter a kiss from me, and I hung up. The kitchen clock said 8:47, but it was 3 minutes fast. I'd noticed it weeks ago and kept forgetting to fix it. I stood there with the phone in my hand. The check was still on the table. The quilt was folded on the chair by the window, in Walter's chair. The furnace came on. If you've ever had to be the one who holds the line when everyone else let go, subscribe. There's one more thing I need to do. I didn't sleep well that night either. Not because of the phone call. The phone call had been exactly what I expected, which was its own kind of sadness. I didn't sleep because I was thinking about custodial accounts. Walter had handled the money in our house for 43 years. Not because I couldn't, but because he was good at it and I was good at other things, and that's how we'd split the world. He knew about IRAs and compound interest and the difference between a money market account and a CD. I knew about fabric and stitch tension and how to tell a woman her dress didn't fit without making her feel like it was her body's fault. But I'd run the shop's books, 36 years of payroll, taxes, supply orders, rent. I knew my way around a bank. I just hadn't needed to know my way around this particular corner of one. Saturday morning, I went to the library after all. The book sale was happening. A long table of paperbacks in the community room, sorted by genre, most of them spine-cracked and dog-eared. I bought 3 mysteries and a book about estate planning for families, published in 2019, someone's name written on the inside cover in blue ink. Patricia Goodwin, birthday 2020. I added it to my stack, and the volunteer charged me $4. I read the relevant chapters at the kitchen table with a yellow highlighter Walter had left in the junk drawer. The highlighter still worked. The chapter on UTMA accounts was 11 pages long. I read it twice. underlined the parts about custodians and the age of termination, and the fact that once the money was in the account, it belonged to the child. Not the parents, not the grandparents, the child. I closed the book, looked at the check. Monday morning I went to First National on Broad Street, not State Farm, not the bank where Walter and I had our joint account. A different building, a different parking lot, a different woman behind the desk. This one was named Carol. She had short gray hair and a desk plant that was actually alive, a small succulent in a ceramic pot. I told her I needed to open a custodial account under the Ohio Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. I told her the beneficiary was a minor, Carter Gregory Marsh. I told her I was the custodian. She asked for the child's social security number, which I didn't have. I told her I'd get it. She said that was fine, we could open the account and add it later. I endorsed the check, handed it over. Carol made copies of my ID, the policy, the death certificate, the claim receipt from State Farm, she typed. The keyboard was quieter than Donna's. The office smelled like coffee and the faint sweetness of the succulent. Custodial account under UTMA, Carol said, reading from her screen. The funds are irrevocable. They belong to the minor. The custodian, you, can manage the account for the benefit of the minor, but you cannot withdraw funds for your own use or transfer them to any other person. When Carter reaches the age of majority, 21 in Ohio, the account transfers to him directly. His parents can't touch it. No, only the custodian. And only for the benefit of the minor. I nodded. There was a water stain on the ceiling above Carol's desk, shaped vaguely like a hand. I stared at it while she finished the paperwork. Is there anything else? Carol asked. No, she handed me the deposit receipt. $35,200, account in the name of Carter Gregory Marsh. Custodian, Helen Marsh. No one else had access, not Greg, not Amanda, not me, except to manage it for the boy. I put the receipt in my purse next to the other one. The weeks after that were quiet, which is what I wanted. Quiet was the whole point. Greg called twice more. The first time he asked how I was, I said fine. He asked if I'd thought about coming to see the baby. I said I was thinking about it. He asked if Amanda wanted to know if I was upset about the shower. I said I wasn't upset. This was true. Upset wasn't the word. Upset implied surprise, and nothing that had happened at that shower had surprised me. I'd seen Amanda coming the first time I met her, the way she'd looked around my living room like she was cataloging what needed to change. The way she'd touched the quilt I had on the back of the couch. Not the baby quilt, an older one, a log cabin pattern from 2002, and said, "Oh, you're really into handmade things, aren't you?" Not a question, a diagnosis. The second time Greg called, he didn't mention the shower. He told me Carter had rolled over for the first time. His voice was proud and soft in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child. I told him that was good. He asked if I wanted to come for dinner on Sunday. I said I had plans. I didn't, but I wasn't ready to sit at a table with Amanda and pretend the quilt had never happened. I went to the fabric store in Stowe, not the one on Front Street that closed, the new one in the plaza next to the Walmart. I bought a yard of cream cotton and a spool of blue thread. The woman at the counter asked what I was making. I said I wasn't sure yet. She nodded like that was a fine answer. At home, I ironed the cotton and cut it into squares and didn't sew them, just left them on the table in neat stacks. Walter's 3 leftover squares were still in the shoebox. Dress, 1985. Curtain, 2003. Tablecloth, 2019. I took them out and laid them next to the new ones. His fabric was faded in places. Mine was bright. The difference was obvious, and it was fine. I did not look at Amanda's social media. I want to be clear about that. I didn't go looking, but my neighbor Pat, who was 69 and had recently discovered Instagram and thought this made her an expert, mentioned at the mailbox that Amanda had posted pictures of the nursery. "It's very modern," Pat said. "All gray and white, very clean. Good for her," I said. "There was a blanket on the crib. one of those designer ones. It had a little tag on it in the photo. I couldn't read the brand. Probably expensive, I said. I imagine so. I took the mail inside. A catalog I didn't order. A water bill. A postcard from my sister in Florida saying the weather was beautiful and she wished I'd visit. I set them on the counter and stood there for a minute, and then I went to Walter's closet and took down the shoebox and opened Walter's letter again and read it for the third time. Use your judgment on how to hand it over. You've always had better judgment than me about people. I folded the letter, put it back, closed the shoebox, put it back on the shelf. The quilt was still on the chair by the window. I'd washed it twice since the shower. The garbage bag smell was gone. The fabric had softened the way fabric does when you wash it. A little looser, a little more itself. The center block, the hospital blanket, had frayed slightly at one corner. I could fix it. I hadn't decided if I would. The quilt belonged to Carter. Walter had made that clear. The policy, the letter, the whole architecture of what he'd hidden and how he'd hidden it. The quilt was the vessel, but a vessel needs a safe place to arrive, and I didn't yet know if Carter's house was that place. Amanda had thrown it in the trash once because it didn't match. A washing machine wouldn't change what that meant. I sat down to write the second letter on a Tuesday night in March. 6 weeks after the shower, Carter was almost 3 months old. The pen I chose was Walter's. A cross ballpoint he'd gotten from the hardware store sometime in the 1990s, the gold finish worn down to brass at the grip. Still wrote smoothly. I tested it on a scrap of paper first. Dear Carter, I almost wrote, Dear Franklin. Your grandfather wanted you named Franklin after his father, Franklin Wallace Marsh, who raised 3 children alone in Barberton, Ohio, after their mother left in 1961. Your father knew this. Your grandfather told him in the hospital, and your father said, That's nice, Dad, and that was the end of it. You should know that your grandfather started saving for you before you existed. He bought an insurance policy in 1996 when your father was 9 years old, and he paid it in full that same year, and he never mentioned it to me. He sewed the policy into a quilt he asked me to finish after he died, and he trusted that I would find it when the time came. He was right. The money from that policy is in a bank account in your name. It will be yours when you turn 21. No one can touch it before then. Not your parents, not me, not anyone. Your grandfather wanted you to have a start that no one could take away. That's what this is. Your grandfather also wrote you a letter. Sealed, and it will be given to you at the same time. His words, not mine. I haven't read it to you, and I won't. That's between you and him. The quilt your mother threw away at your baby shower is in my house. It's yours. Every square in it came from something your grandfather and I lived through together. His work shirt, my maternity dress, the blanket from the hospital room the night he died. I made it with hands that don't work the way they used to, and I put 3 months into it, and your mother said it didn't match the nursery and dropped it in the garbage on camera. I'm keeping it for now, not to punish anyone, because a thing that took that long to make deserves a home that knows what it is. When I'm sure you have that home, you'll get the quilt too. You are a Marsh. That means something, even if the name they gave you doesn't say it. Your grandmother, Helen. I read it over twice. Changed, called it Not Our Theme to said it didn't match the nursery. The first version felt like I was scoring points. The second was just what happened. I signed it, folded it, put it in a white envelope and sealed it. Then I took Walter's letter from the shoebox. His envelope was brown at the edges now, the tape brittle. I put both envelopes, his and mine, into a larger manila envelope and addressed it to Carol at First National. A note inside, please hold these letters until Carter Gregory Marsh reaches the age of 18, at which time they should be delivered to him directly along with any remaining account information. I stamped it, set it by the front door. The quilt was on the chair. I looked at it for a long time. 9 blocks, Ohio Star. The center block with its small coffee-colored stain. Walter's stitches in the bottom seam, still visible if you knew where to look. I picked it up and folded it again, the way I fold everything. In thirds, then in half, corners aligned. I put it on the shelf in the guest room closet, on top of a pillowcase I'd embroidered in 1998, and a wool blanket Walter's mother had made before I met her. A shelf of handmade things that hadn't been thrown away yet. 3 months later, June. Hot for Ohio, 89 degrees and the kind of humidity that makes your clothes stick to the small of your back. I had the fan going in the guest room and the curtains drawn and the door cracked so I could hear if he woke up. Carter was on the bed. 6 months old now, sitting up on his own since last week, Greg had told me. He'd come over with Amanda. Amanda had come in, said hello, sat on the couch with her phone face down on her knee, and hadn't said much else. Greg had taken Carter into the guest room to change him and then said, "Mom, do you mind if he naps here? He's fussy, and this room is cooler." I'd said that was fine. Now Carter was asleep on his stomach, one fist curled near his face, his breathing that shallow, rhythmic sound that babies make. He was wearing a onesie with a small giraffe on the chest. The sheet underneath him was white with a faint yellow pattern. Daisies, I think, or maybe stars. One corner had come loose from the mattress and was poking up at an angle. I'd gotten the quilt down from the closet and spread it over him without thinking about it. Just happened. He was there, and the quilt was there, and the two things needed to be together. The cream and blue fabric settled over his small body, and the Ohio Star blocks lay flat, and the center block, the hospital blanket, rested just above his curled fist. He didn't stir. His breathing stayed the same. The fan turned slowly, pushing warm air around the room. I stood in the doorway and looked at him under the quilt and thought about Walter's father, Franklin Wallace Marsh, in his 2-bedroom house in Barberton in 1961. 3 children, no wife, 31 years at the plant. I thought about Walter at 9 years old, the age Greg was when the policy was bought. I thought about the $17 Franklin had started a savings account with in 1954, and the $35,200 Walter had turned it into by thinking in decades. The name Carter was on the birth certificate. Franklin was in a manila envelope in a bank vault, waiting for a boy to turn 18 and meet his grandfather for the first time. From the living room, I could hear the low murmur of Amanda's phone. She'd picked it up again, talking to someone, her voice careful and pleasant the way it was when she was performing for an audience, even if the audience was just one person on the other end of a call. But before she dialed, she'd stood in the doorway for a moment, watching me spread the quilt over her son. She hadn't said anything. She'd just looked at it longer than she needed to, the way you look at something you're trying to place. And then she'd gone to find her phone. I stepped back from the doorway, left it open an inch. The fan hummed. Carter's fist uncurled slightly, then curled again, and the quilt rose and fell with his breathing, and the center block with its small stain that might have been coffee or might have been betadine rested exactly where I'd placed it, over the heart of a boy who would one day open an envelope and find out what his name was supposed to be.